The clock on the wall showed 10:15 p.m. when Marcus Thompson pushed his cleaning cart through the back door of the Metropolitan Concert Hall. He was right on time, just like every other night. The large wheels of the cart made a soft squeaking sound on the polished floor. Marcus had learned to move quietly over the years. In a place like this, no one wanted to hear a janitor working. He was 52 years old now. His hair had turned gray at the sides, and his hands showed the rough texture of decades of hard work. He wore a dark blue uniform with his name stitched on the pocket. The uniform was always clean and pressed. Marcus took pride in his appearance, even if most people never really looked at him. The concert had ended about an hour ago. Marcus had watched from his small office near the service entrance as hundreds of well-dressed people had walked out the main doors. Women in elegant dresses, men in expensive suits. They talked and laughed, still excited about the music they had just heard. None of them knew Marcus existed. He was invisible to them, just another worker in the background of their evening. Now the building was almost empty. A few musicians still remained, packing their instruments in cases. Marcus began his nightly routine in the main lobby. He swept the red carpet first, picking up dropped programs and forgotten ticket stubs. Someone had spilled champagne near the coat check. He cleaned it carefully, making sure no sticky residue remained. As he worked, he heard music drifting from the main concert hall. The orchestra was having a late rehearsal. This happened sometimes, usually when they were preparing for an important performance. Marcus paused for a moment, his hand resting on his mop. The sound of violins floated through the air, sweet and clear. He knew this piece. It was Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Even without seeing the musicians, he could picture exactly what was happening on stage. The violins would be in the front rows, their bows moving in perfect unity, the cellos behind them, providing the deep, rich foundation, and somewhere in the middle the conductor would be standing on his podium, arms raised, guiding them all. Marcus felt something stir in his chest. It was an old feeling, one he tried not to think about anymore. He shook his head and went back to mopping. There was work to do. By 11 p.m. he had finished the lobby and moved to the hallways. His colleague Rosa was cleaning the restrooms. She was a short woman in her 60s, originally from Mexico. She had worked at the concert hall even longer than Marcus. They were friends in the way that night shift workers become friends, sharing quiet conversation during their breaks. "Still practicing in there," Rosa said, nodding toward the concert hall as she passed Marcus in the hallway. "Yes," Marcus replied. "Big show coming up, I think." "You always know what they're playing," Rosa observed, smiling. "I just hear noise, but you can tell me the name of every piece." Marcus shrugged. "I listen a lot. That's all." But it wasn't just listening. Marcus knew music in a way that went deeper than most people could understand. He knew it in his bones, in his blood. But that was a part of his life he had locked away long ago. At midnight, the musicians finally left. A young woman with a violin case said a quick "good night" to Marcus as she hurried past. He nodded and smiled, but she was already gone, probably not even registering his face. A man carrying a trumpet didn't even look his way. The conductor was the last to leave. Maestro Victor Castellano was a tall man with silver hair swept back from his forehead. He wore an expensive black coat and carried a leather briefcase. As he walked through the lobby, he was talking on his phone, his voice loud and important sounding. No, the tempo in the second movement is still too slow," he was saying. "These musicians need to understand the urgency of the piece." He walked right past Marcus without a glance. Marcus might as well have been a statue or a piece of furniture. He was used to it. Once everyone was gone, the concert hall became Marcus's domain. He pushed open the heavy doors and entered the main auditorium. This was his favorite part of the night. The space was massive, with row after row of red velvet seats rising up toward the back. The ceiling soared high above, decorated with painted angels and gold trim. Crystal chandeliers hung down, their lights dimmed now to a soft glow. And at the front there was the stage. The wooden floor gleamed under the lights. Music stands were still set up in neat semicircles. The conductor's podium stood in the center, a simple raised platform with a small railing. Marcus began sweeping the stage, moving carefully between the stands and chairs. As he worked, he hummed softly. The melody that came from his throat was complex, a piece by a modern composer that the orchestra had been rehearsing earlier. He knew every note, every change in rhythm. His humming grew a little louder. There was no one here to hear him now. The sound echoed in the empty hall, filling the space. For just a moment, Marcus let himself remember what it felt like to be surrounded by music, to be a part of it. He picked up a forgotten pencil from the floor near the conductor's podium. Without thinking, he stepped up onto the platform. He stood there looking out at the empty seats, the pencil held loosely in his hand like a baton. His arm rose slowly. In his mind, he could hear the orchestra, the violins beginning with that opening phrase. He moved his hand, keeping time with the invisible music. His movements were smooth and precise, guiding instruments that weren't there through measures and crescendos and soft diminuendos. For 3 minutes, Marcus conducted an imaginary orchestra in an empty hall. His face showed an expression he never wore during the day. There was joy there and sadness and a deep longing for something lost. Then reality crashed back in. He lowered his arm and looked at the pencil in his hand. What was he doing? He was a janitor. This wasn't his world anymore. It hadn't been for a very long time. He stepped down from the podium quickly, almost embarrassed, even though no one had seen him. He placed the pencil carefully on the music stand where it belonged. Then he went back to his work, sweeping and dusting, emptying trash cans and straightening chairs. By 2 a.m. the stage was clean. Marcus moved on to the backstage areas, the dressing rooms where the musicians prepared before performances. He wiped down mirrors and emptied wastebaskets. He found a forgotten scarf on a hook and hung it more securely so it wouldn't fall. In one of the practice rooms, he discovered sheet music scattered across the floor. Someone had dropped a folder and hadn't bothered to pick it all up. Marcus knelt down and gathered the papers carefully. As he sorted them, his eyes scanned the notes and symbols. This was a piece he didn't recognize, something modern and challenging with unusual time signatures and complex harmonies. He studied it for a long moment, his mind automatically analyzing the structure. It was beautiful in its own difficult way. He could see where the challenges would be for the orchestra, where the conductor would need to really work to keep everyone together. Then he placed the music neatly on the piano and continued cleaning. The rest of the night passed in quiet routine. At 4 a.m., Marcus took his lunch break in the small staff room. He ate a sandwich he had brought from home and drank coffee from a thermos. Rosa joined him and they talked about simple things. Her grandson's soccer game, the weather, a funny thing that had happened on the bus. At 6 a.m., as dawn began to light up the sky outside, Marcus punched out on the time clock. His shift was over. The concert hall was spotless, ready for another day of rehearsals and performances. He walked to the bus stop in the early morning air, just another tired worker heading home. On the bus, he looked out the window at the city waking up. In a few hours, the musicians would arrive at the concert hall. They would practice and perfect their art. The maestro would stand on that podium, commanding the orchestra with his authority and skill. And tonight, Marcus would return. He would push his mop and empty the trash and remain invisible. He would listen to the music through walls and doors, always on the outside looking in. That was his life now. That was all it could ever be. But sometimes, in empty halls when no one was watching, he let himself remember what it felt like to be more than just a janitor. Marcus lived in a small apartment on the north side of the city. It was a 40-minute bus ride from the concert hall. The building was old, with narrow hallways and stairs that creaked. His apartment was on the 3rd floor, number 3 on 12. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom, and a living room that barely fit a couch and a television. It wasn't much, but it was his. He had lived here for 8 years now. The rent was affordable and the landlord didn't bother him. That was all Marcus needed. When he got home that morning, he was tired. Night shifts did that to a person, turned the whole world upside down. While everyone else was starting their day, Marcus was ending his. He made himself breakfast, eggs and toast, and ate standing at the kitchen counter. The apartment was quiet. It had been quiet for 3 years now, ever since his daughter had left for college. Her name was Jennifer. She was 22 now, studying business at a state university 5 hours away. Her old bedroom stood empty, exactly as she had left it. Marcus kept it clean, dusting the furniture and making the bed even though no one slept there anymore. After eating, Marcus knew he should sleep. His body needed rest, but sometimes sleep was hard to find even when exhaustion pulled at him. He sat on the couch and turned on the television, not really watching, just letting the noise fill the silence. His eyes drifted to the closet in the corner of the living room. The door was closed, as always. He tried not to look at that closet very often. Tried not to think about what was inside it, but today, for some reason, his mind wouldn't let it go. Before he could stop himself, Marcus stood up and walked to the closet. His hand rested on the doorknob for a long moment. Then he opened it. The closet was full of ordinary things. Winter coats, old shoes, boxes of papers and photographs. But in the back, behind everything else, there was one box that was different. It was made of sturdy cardboard and the top was taped shut. Written on the side in faded marker were the words, Marcus Music School. He hadn't opened this box in more than 20 years. Maybe longer, but now he pulled it out, carried it to the couch and sat down with it in his lap. The tape was old and yellow. It peeled away easily. Marcus lifted the lid and looked inside. On top was a program from a concert. The paper was brittle with age. Spring Showcase, it said. Brookfield Conservatory of Music. The date was from 27 years ago. Marcus picked it up carefully and read through the list of performers. There, halfway down the page, was his name. Marcus Thompson, conducting. He had been 25 years old then. So young, so full of dreams. Under the program were books on music theory, their pages yellowed and covers worn. There were notebooks filled with Marcus's handwriting, analyzing compositions and practicing conducting patterns. There were photographs of him with other students, all of them smiling, all of them certain they were going to change the world. And at the bottom of the box was his conductor's baton. It was a simple wooden stick, light and balanced perfectly. Marcus lifted it out and held it in his hand. The wood was smooth, polished by hours of use. He could remember the weight of it, the way it felt to hold this small piece of wood and use it to shape sound into beauty. Marcus closed his eyes and let the memories come. He had discovered music when he was 8 years old. His elementary school had a music program and the teacher had taught them to sing. Marcus had a good voice, clear and strong, but more than that, he understood music. He could hear how all the parts fit together. He could feel the rhythm in his chest, the melody in his mind. By middle school, he was learning piano. By high school, he was in every musical group available, choir, jazz band, orchestra. He played piano and trumpet, but what he really loved was the way music worked as a whole. He loved understanding how 50 different instruments could come together to create one perfect sound. His music teacher in high school, Mr. Peterson, had been the one to suggest conducting. "You have a gift, Marcus," he had said. "Not just for playing, but for understanding. You could lead others. You could teach them to make something beautiful together." Marcus had applied to the Brookfield Conservatory of Music, one of the best music schools in the region. He had been accepted with a scholarship. His parents had been so proud. His mother had cried happy tears. His father had shaken his hand like Marcus was already a success. The conservatory had been everything Marcus had dreamed of. He studied for hours every day. Music theory, composition, history of classical music, conducting technique. He practiced with student orchestras, learning how to communicate with musicians, how to bring out the emotion in a piece, how to fix problems when things went wrong. His teachers said he was talented. They said he had a future. In his third year, he had been chosen to conduct a full performance of a Brahms symphony. The concert hall had been full, and the performance had gone beautifully. After the final note, the audience had stood and applauded. Marcus had felt like he was flying. That had been the best night of his life. He had been 24 years old and the whole world was open in front of him. Then everything had fallen apart. It happened in his final year. Marcus was months away from graduation, already applying to assistant conductor positions with professional orchestras. He had interviews lined up. His professors were writing him recommendation letters. He could see his future so clearly. Then his father got sick, cancer. It had come suddenly and aggressively. 1 month his father was fine. The next month he was in the hospital, unable to work. Marcus's family had never had much money. His father worked in construction. His mother cleaned houses. They had done everything they could to support Marcus's education, but there was no savings account, no safety net for emergencies. The medical bills started piling up. His mother couldn't pay them alone. She was working 2 jobs, but it wasn't enough. The house they lived in was at risk. There was talk of bankruptcy. Marcus had a younger brother and sister still in high school. They needed food, clothes, stability. The family was drowning, and Marcus was the only one who could help. He had made the decision in a single terrible night. He had sat in his small dorm room, looking at his acceptance letters and interview schedules, and he had known what he had to do. He dropped out of the conservatory 3 months before graduation. He moved back home. He found work, any work that would pay. Construction jobs like his father used to do, warehouse work, night shifts at grocery stores, anything to bring money in. His professors had begged him to reconsider. "You're so close, Marcus," they had said. "Just finish the degree. The opportunities you'll have will let you help your family even more." But Marcus couldn't wait. His family needed help now, not after graduation. His father fought the cancer for 2 years before he died. By then, Marcus was 27 years old. He had been out of school for so long that going back felt impossible. His skills were rusty. His contacts in the music world had moved on without him. And the truth was, he was tired. He was tired of struggling, tired of hoping, tired of dreaming about things that seemed so far away. So he kept working regular jobs. He sent money to his mother. He helped his brother and sister get through school. He did what needed to be done. Years passed. Marcus moved from job to job. He met a woman, fell in love, got married. They had Jennifer. For a while, life was good in a simple, ordinary way, but the marriage didn't last. His wife left when Jennifer was 10, said she needed more from life than Marcus could give her. He didn't fight it. Maybe she was right. He raised Jennifer on his own. He worked hard to give her everything she needed. Food, clothes, a safe place to live. He helped with homework and went to parent-teacher conferences. He saved every penny he could for her college fund, determined that she would have opportunities he never had. Music became something he didn't talk about. It was a part of his past, a door that had closed. Jennifer knew he liked music, knew he sometimes hummed while doing chores, but she didn't know about the conservatory. She didn't know that her father had once stood on a stage and conducted a symphony. What would be the point of telling her? It was so long ago. It was a different life, a different Marcus. That young man with dreams and talent seemed like a stranger now. Marcus looked down at the baton in his hand. He stood up and walked to the small mirror hanging on the wall. He looked at his reflection. A middle-aged man with gray hair and tired eyes. A man in a janitor's uniform who smelled like cleaning chemicals. He raised the baton just like he had done on stage all those years ago. His arm moved through the air in the old familiar patterns. Down on the downbeat. Up on the upbeat. The movements were still there, buried in his muscle memory, but it felt silly now. Like a kid playing pretend. He was 52 years old. He cleaned floors for a living. What was he doing, standing in his apartment waving a stick around like he was somebody important? Marcus lowered his arm. He put the baton back in the box. He closed the lid and taped it shut again. Then he carried it back to the closet and pushed it behind all the other boxes out of sight. That part of his life was over. It had been over for 25 years. There was no point in thinking about it. No point in wishing things had been different. He was just a janitor. That was his reality. Marcus went to bed and pulled the covers over himself. Outside the window, the city was alive with people starting their days. But in his dark bedroom, 3 weeks passed in Marcus's usual routine. Work, sleep, eat, repeat. The days blended together in a comfortable numbness. He had learned not to want more than what he had. Wanting more only led to pain. But something was different at the concert hall. Marcus could feel a tension in the air. The musicians seemed stressed, talking in worried voices during their breaks. Rehearsals ran longer than usual. Even the administrative staff seemed on edge, rushing through the hallways with tight expressions. Rosa noticed it too. "Something big is coming," she said to Marcus one night as they ate their lunch break together. "Did you see all those fancy decorations being delivered today?" Marcus nodded. He had seen the boxes of flowers, the expensive linens, the cases of champagne being wheeled in through the service entrance. "The annual gala," he said. "It's in 3 weeks. Big fundraiser for the orchestra." "Ah," Rosa said. "That explains why everyone is so crazy." The annual gala was the concert hall's biggest event of the year. Rich donors came dressed in their finest clothes. They paid thousands of dollars for tickets. The money raised kept the orchestra running, paid salaries, funded programs. It was crucial for the organization, and the performance had to be perfect. There could be no mistakes when so much was at stake. Marcus noticed the increased rehearsal schedule. The orchestra was practicing 6 days a week now, sometimes twice a day. They were working on the usual classical pieces, Beethoven and Mozart. music that audiences loved and expected. But they were also rehearsing something different, something Marcus hadn't heard before. It was a modern piece composed by someone living and working today. The music was challenging, full of unusual rhythms and unexpected harmonies. Marcus heard fragments of it through the walls as he cleaned. The musicians seemed to be struggling with it. He heard the same sections repeated over and over, never quite sounding right. One evening, about 10 days before the gala, Marcus was cleaning the hallway near the backstage area. It was around 9 p.m., and rehearsal had just ended. The musicians were packing up, talking among themselves in tired voices. Marcus pushed his cart quietly, staying out of the way. That's when he heard raised voices coming from one of the dressing rooms. The door was slightly open, and Marcus could hear every word clearly. "This is a disaster, Thomas. An absolute disaster." That was Maestro Castellano's voice, sharp with anger. "I understand your concern, Maestro, but—" Another voice, younger, trying to sound calm. This was Thomas Chen, the assistant conductor. Marcus had seen him around, a man in his 30s with glasses and a quiet manner. "You don't understand anything," Castellano interrupted. "The gala is in 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and now Michael calls to tell me he has pneumonia and can't come. He was supposed to conduct the Rostov piece. That was the centerpiece of the entire evening." Marcus's hand froze on his cleaning cart. The Rostov piece. That must be the modern composition they had been rehearsing, and someone named Michael was supposed to conduct it. "Perhaps we could move one of the classical pieces to that slot instead," Thomas suggested carefully. "Something the orchestra knows better." "No, the donors specifically want to hear contemporary work. We promised them something special, something they can't hear anywhere else. That's why we commissioned the Rostov piece in the first place. It's the only reason half of these wealthy art lovers are even coming." There was a pause. Marcus heard footsteps pacing back and forth. "Can you conduct it, Maestro?" Thomas asked. "You know the piece." Castellano made a sound of frustration. "I'm already conducting the first half of the program, the Beethoven, the Mozart, the Brahms. That's nearly 90 minutes of music. I can't do both halves. I'll be exhausted. My arms will be useless by the second half. And besides, the Rostov piece isn't my style. I've been letting Michael take the lead on it because he understands that modern nonsense better than I do." "What about bringing in another guest conductor?" Thomas suggested. "In 3 weeks? Everyone worth hiring is already booked. I've made 5 calls already. The few people who are available are either too expensive or not qualified for a piece this difficult." Marcus continued pushing his cart slowly down the hallway, but his mind was racing. He knew the Rostov piece they were talking about. Well, he didn't know it personally, but he knew of Dmitri Rostov. The composer was famous in contemporary classical music circles. His work was known for being emotionally powerful but technically complex. "What if I conducted it?" Thomas said quietly. There was a long silence. When Castellano spoke again, his voice dripped with condescension. "Thomas, you're a competent assistant. You can lead warm-ups and handle rehearsals when I'm not available. But conducting a world premiere at a gala performance, in front of our most important donors, that requires skill and presence you simply don't have. No offense." "I've been studying the piece intensively," Thomas said, and Marcus could hear the hurt in his voice. "I think I understand it well enough to—" "The answer is no. I need someone with real experience. Someone who can command the stage and make those donors feel like their money is well spent. You're not ready for that." Marcus heard a door slam. Heavy footsteps came down the hallway toward him. He immediately bent over his cart, pretending to organize cleaning supplies. Maestro Castellano stormed past without even glancing in his direction, his phone already pressed to his ear. "Yes. Hello? Is this the Morrison Agency? I need to speak to someone about emergency conductor placement." His voice faded as he walked away. Thomas emerged from the dressing room a moment later, looking defeated. He walked in the opposite direction, shoulders slumped. Marcus stood alone in the hallway, his heart pounding. His mind was spinning with what he had just heard. They needed a conductor, someone who understood modern composition, someone who could handle the pressure of an important performance. For just a moment, a wild thought crossed his mind, but he pushed it away immediately. That was crazy. He was a janitor. He had been away from music for 25 years. And even if he remembered everything he once knew, who would ever take him seriously? He went back to his cleaning, but he couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. As he mopped floors and emptied trash cans, his mind kept returning to the problem. A modern piece, complex rhythms. The orchestra was struggling with it. They needed someone who could bring it together. Later that night, when the building was empty, Marcus found himself drawn back to the main concert hall. He walked onto the stage, something he rarely did. The music stands were still set up from rehearsal. Sheet music was scattered across some of them, left behind in the musicians' hurry to pack up. Marcus walked over to the conductor's podium. On the music stand there was a score, thick with notes and markings. The title page read, "Fractured Light" by Dmitri Rostov. He knew he shouldn't touch it. It wasn't his business. But his hands moved on their own, picking up the score and opening it. His eyes scanned the first page, reading the notes like a language he had once spoken fluently. The piece opened with the strings playing in an unusual time signature, 7/8. The melody was fragmented, jumping between different instruments in a way that created tension and unease. But underneath that, Marcus could see the structure. There was a logic to it, an emotional journey the composer was trying to create. He turned pages following the music through its development. The piece grew more intense, building toward what looked like a climax in the middle. Then it broke apart into something quieter, more introspective. The final pages showed a resolution that wasn't quite happy but felt earned, like peace after struggle. It was beautiful. Difficult, yes, unusual, certainly, but beautiful in its own way. Marcus could hear it in his mind, could imagine exactly how it should sound if performed correctly. He could see where the challenges were, where the orchestra would need guidance to stay together. His fingers itched to pick up a baton. His arms wanted to move through the air, shaping the music. For a moment, he let himself imagine standing on this podium for real, in front of the full orchestra, bringing this challenging piece to life. But then reality crashed back in. He was 52 years old. He was a janitor in a worn blue uniform. He had no credentials that mattered, no reputation, no connections. Even if he could still conduct, even if he remembered everything he had learned, why would anyone listen to him? And more than that, could he even still do it? It had been so long. Maybe his skills were gone, rusted away from years of disuse. Maybe that young, talented student he had been was truly dead, replaced by the tired, middle-aged man he had become. Marcus carefully placed the score back on the stand exactly as he had found it. He stepped down from the podium and went back to his cleaning cart. He finished his work in silence, pushing thoughts of conducting out of his mind. But over the next few days, he couldn't stop thinking about the Rostov piece. Every time he heard the orchestra rehearsing it, he listened carefully. He heard the places where they got confused, where the timing fell apart, where the emotion didn't quite land. In his mind, he knew how to fix those problems. He could see the solutions so clearly. And he heard Castellano's voice during rehearsals, growing more frustrated day by day. No, the violins are coming in too early. The rhythm is wrong, listen to each other. But the maestro's corrections didn't seem to be helping. Marcus didn't sleep well that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind spinning with thoughts he couldn't turn off. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the score of the Rostov piece. He heard the orchestra struggling with the difficult passages. He saw the empty conductor's podium waiting for someone to step up. By the time his alarm went off at 9 p.m., he had made a decision. It was probably a terrible decision. It would probably lead to nothing but embarrassment. But he had to try. He couldn't live with himself if he didn't at least try. He had to talk to Maestro Castellano. He had to offer his help. Even if the maestro laughed at him, even if nothing came of it, he had to speak up. The old Marcus, the one who had hidden his past for 25 years, told him to stay quiet and invisible. But there was another part of him, a part he thought was dead, that refused to be silent any longer. Marcus showered and dressed in his uniform. He looked at himself in the mirror. Should he wear something else? Something more professional? But he didn't own anything professional. He had work clothes and casual clothes, nothing that would make him look like someone important enough to talk to a maestro. No. If he was going to do this, he would do it as himself. As who he was now, not who he wished he could be. The bus ride to work felt longer than usual. Marcus's stomach was tight with nerves. His hands were sweaty. He tried to plan what he would say, but every version sounded stupid in his head. How do you tell someone that you, a janitor, think you can solve their problems? How do you explain a past that you've kept secret for so long? He arrived at the concert hall at his usual time, 10 p.m. He punched in and got his cart ready, but his mind wasn't on cleaning. He knew the orchestra had rehearsal scheduled tonight. Castellano would be here. This was his chance. But as the night went on, Marcus's courage started to fade. Every time he thought about approaching the maestro, fear gripped him. What if Castellano got angry? What if he complained to management and Marcus lost his job? What if everyone found out and they all laughed at him? He was just about to give up, to forget the whole crazy idea, when he saw Castellano taking a break in the hallway. The maestro was alone, drinking water from a bottle and checking his phone. It was now or never. If Marcus didn't do it now, he knew he never would. He took a deep breath and walked over. His legs felt shaky, but he forced himself to keep moving. "Excuse me, Maestro Castellano." The maestro looked up from his phone, his expression showing mild annoyance at being interrupted. "Yes, what is it?" His eyes took in Marcus's uniform, the name tag, the cleaning cart nearby. His face showed that he didn't recognize Marcus at all, even though Marcus had worked here for 3 years. "I'm Marcus Thompson. I work here on the night cleaning crew." Marcus's voice came out softer than he intended. He cleared his throat. "I wanted to talk to you about the gala performance. I heard you're having trouble finding a conductor for the Rostov piece." Castellano's eyebrows went up. "How do you know about that?" "That's private orchestra business. I overheard you talking. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but..." Marcus stumbled over his words. This was already going badly. He tried to steady himself. "The thing is, I have a background in music. I studied conducting at the Brookfield Conservatory. I never finished my degree, but I had 3.5 years of training, and I've been listening to your rehearsals of the Rostov piece. I think I could help." For a moment, Castellano just stared at him. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile someone makes when they've heard something absurd. "You studied conducting? At Brookfield?" He said it like he was repeating a joke. "Yes, sir. From 1998 to 2001. I studied under Professor Raymond Hartwell and now you're a janitor." Castellano's voice cut through Marcus's explanation. The maestro looked him up and down, taking in every detail of Marcus's worn uniform, his cleaning cart, his work boots. "Let me understand this correctly. You think you can conduct one of the most challenging contemporary pieces written in the last decade? At our most important fundraiser of the year? Because you went to music school over 20 years ago?" Other people were starting to notice the conversation. A few musicians had come out of the rehearsal hall during the break. They stood in small groups watching. Marcus felt their eyes on him. Heat rose to his face, but he pushed forward. He had started this. He had to finish it. "I know it sounds strange," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I'm familiar with Rostov's work. I understand the structure of the piece. I've been listening to your rehearsals, and I think I can see where the orchestra is having trouble. If you would just give me a chance to..." "A chance?" Castellano laughed. It was a sharp, loud sound that echoed in the hallway. Several of the musicians laughed too. Quieter, but still audible. Marcus felt each laugh like a physical blow. "You want me to give you a chance? Do you have any idea what's at stake here? We have donors paying $5,000 per ticket. We have board members, critics, journalists. This performance has to be flawless. And you think I'm going to hand over the baton to someone who mops floors for a living?" "I'm just trying to help," Marcus said quietly. His confidence was crumbling with every word, but he couldn't give up yet. "I know the music. I know conducting. Just because I haven't done it professionally doesn't mean I can't." "Can't what? Step onto that stage and suddenly become a maestro?" Castellano shook his head, his expression a mix of pity and contempt. "You know what conducting requires? A lifetime of dedication. Years of training, constant practice, experience in front of audiences, respect from musicians who have to trust your judgment. You can't just pick that up from listening through walls while you're emptying trash cans." The words hit Marcus harder than he expected. He had known this might happen. He had prepared himself for rejection. But hearing it out loud, spoken with such certainty, with such dismissal of everything he had once been, it hurt more than he thought possible. "I had that training," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper now. "I was good. My professor said I had real talent. I conducted a full Brahms symphony in my 3rd year. I got a standing ovation. 25 years ago," Castellano said. The maestro's voice was gentler now, but somehow that made it worse. It was the voice of someone explaining simple reality to a child. "Whatever talent you had back then, it's gone now. Buried under 25 years of not using it. You can't just resurrect a career that never even started. That's not how this works," Marcus wanted to argue. He wanted to explain about his father's illness, about the choices he'd had to make, about how life didn't always let people follow their dreams. But looking at Castellano's face, he knew it wouldn't matter. Nothing he said would change the maestro's mind. To Castellano, Marcus was just a janitor with delusions. "I understand," Marcus said finally. His voice sounded hollow, even to himself. "I'm sorry for wasting your time." He turned to walk away, but Castellano's voice stopped him. "Marcus, wait." Marcus turned back, a tiny spark of hope igniting despite everything. Maybe the maestro had reconsidered. Maybe. "I don't mean to be cruel," Castellano said. "But you need to understand something. This world, professional music, it's not for people who tried once and gave up. It's not for people who had dreams but chose other paths. It's for people who sacrificed everything, who never stopped, who lived and breathed music every single day of their lives. That's not you. That stopped being you a long time ago." The maestro's words were meant to be kind in their own way, meant to be honest, but they felt like a door slamming shut, not just on this opportunity, but on everything Marcus had once hoped to be. "You're right," Marcus said. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have bothered you." This time when he turned away, Castellano didn't stop him. Marcus walked back to his cart, his face burning with shame. Behind him, he could hear whispers and a few more quiet laughs from the musicians. He heard someone say, "Can you believe that?" The janitor wanted to conduct. He pushed his cart down the hallway, turned a corner, and kept going until he found an empty storage room. He went inside and closed the door. Then he stood there in the dark, his hands gripping the edge of a shelf, trying to breathe normally. What had he been thinking? Of course Castellano had laughed. Of course the musicians had found it ridiculous. He was a 52-year-old janitor. He had no right to offer his help. No right to think he could still do something he had walked away from 25 years ago. All those thoughts he'd been having, all that hope that had been building over the past few days, it had been stupid, childish. He had let himself believe in something that couldn't be real, and now he had humiliated himself in front of everyone. Tomorrow the whole staff would probably know about it. The janitor who thought he could be a conductor. They would all laugh. Marcus stayed in that storage room for 20 minutes, waiting for his hands to stop shaking, waiting for the heat to leave his face. When he finally emerged, he went back to his work with his head down. He avoided everyone. He cleaned quickly and efficiently, wanting nothing more than for this night to be over. Rosa found him around 2 a.m. She must have heard about what happened because she looked at him with such sympathy that it almost broke him. "Marcus," she said softly, "are you okay?" Marcus didn't return to work the next night. For the first time in 3 years, he called in sick. It wasn't entirely a lie. He felt sick, just not in the way his supervisor understood. He felt sick with shame and regret, sick with the weight of his own foolishness. He spent the day in his apartment, trying not to think about what had happened. But the thoughts came anyway, replaying the scene over and over. Castellano's laugh, the musician's whispers, his own voice small and pathetic, trying to convince people he was something he wasn't. Around 3 p.m. there was a knock on his door. Marcus almost didn't answer. He wasn't expecting anyone and he didn't want to see anyone, but the knocking continued, insistent. He opened the door to find Rosa standing there. She was wearing her street clothes, not her work uniform. She must have come straight here after her shift ended in the morning, probably slept a few hours and then made the trip across the city. In her hands she held a container of homemade food. "You didn't come to work," she said simply. "I was worried." "I'm fine," Marcus said, though they both knew it was a lie. "Just needed a day off." "Can I come in?" Rosa asked. It wasn't really a question. She was already walking past him into the apartment. Marcus closed the door and followed her to the kitchen, where she started opening cabinets, looking for plates. "When did you last eat something real? Not just coffee and toast?" Marcus couldn't remember. Rosa, you didn't have to come all the way here. I know I didn't have to. I wanted to. She started serving the food she'd brought, some kind of rice and chicken dish that smelled amazing. She put a plate in front of Marcus and one in front of herself, then sat down at his small kitchen table. Sit, eat. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was good, warming. Marcus hadn't realized how hungry he was. Rosa watched him with the patience of a mother who knows when to wait and when to push. Finally, she spoke. I heard the whole thing. What happened with Maestro Castellano? Marcus put down his fork. Then you know what an idiot I was. I know you were brave, Rosa corrected him. You saw a problem and tried to help. That's not idiotic. That's good. Rosa, he laughed at me. They all laughed at me. Some people laughed, Rosa agreed. Some people are always going to laugh when someone tries to rise above their station. But not everyone laughed, Marcus. I didn't laugh, and there was someone else who didn't laugh either. Marcus looked at her confused. What do you mean? Rosa pulled out her phone and showed him a text message. It was from someone named Elena. Do you know who Elena Kozlov is? The principal violinist, Marcus said slowly. He had seen her many times, a woman in her early 40s with short dark hair. She always arrived early and stayed late, practicing alone in one of the rehearsal rooms. I've never spoken to her. Well, she wants to speak to you. She sent me this message last night after what happened. She wants to meet with you. Marcus shook his head. Why would she want to meet with me? To tell me how ridiculous I was. Read the message. Marcus took the phone and read, Rosa, I need to talk to the janitor who spoke to Castellano tonight. Marcus Thompson. Can you give him my number? This is important. She wouldn't say why, Rosa continued. But I've known Elena for a long time. She's a serious person. She doesn't waste time on things that don't matter. If she wants to talk to you, there's a reason. Marcus handed back the phone. I don't want to talk to anyone. I just want to forget this whole thing happened. Marcus. Rosa's voice was firm now. I'm going to tell you something I don't tell many people. When I came to this country 28 years ago, I was a teacher. In Mexico, I taught high school English. But my credentials didn't transfer here. My English wasn't good enough yet for American schools, so I took cleaning jobs to survive. I told myself it was temporary, just until I could get certified here. She paused, looking down at her hands. 28 years later, I'm still cleaning. You know why? Because after a few years, I stopped trying. I stopped taking the classes I needed. I stopped believing I could be a teacher again. I let the world tell me who I was. A cleaning woman. And I accepted it. Marcus had never heard this story before. He looked at Rosa with new understanding. You regret it. Every day, Rosa said quietly. Every day I wonder what my life would have been like if I hadn't given up on myself. If I had kept fighting, kept believing. She looked up at Marcus with intensity in her eyes. You tried to fight. You tried to be more than what people see when they look at your uniform. Yes, it went badly. Yes, you got hurt, but at least you tried. Don't let one bad moment make you give up on yourself the way I did. But I'm not a conductor anymore, Marcus said. Maybe I never really was. It was so long ago. Castellano was right. Whatever skill I had is gone. Is it? Rosa challenged him. You listen to those rehearsals every night. I see your face when you hear them struggling with that difficult piece. You know what's wrong. You know how to fix it. That doesn't sound like someone whose skills are gone. Marcus wanted to argue, but he couldn't find the words. Because she was right. He did know. He did hear the problems, and in his mind he knew exactly how to solve them. But knowing and doing were two different things. Talk to Elena, Rosa urged. What's the worst that can happen? You already feel terrible. At least find out why she wants to meet you. Marcus thought about it. Rosa was right. He couldn't feel much worse than he already did, and his curiosity was getting the better of him. Why would the principal violinist want to talk to him? Okay, he said finally. I'll talk to her. Rosa smiled and handed him a piece of paper with a phone number written on it. She said you could call any time. After Rosa left, Marcus stared at the phone number for an hour. He picked up his phone 3 times and put it down 3 times. Finally, as the afternoon sun started to fade, he made himself dial the number. His heart pounded as it rang. Hello? A woman's voice, accented with Russian roots but fluent in English. Is this Elena Kozlov? This is Marcus Thompson. Rosa said you wanted to talk to me. Marcus? Yes, thank you for calling. Can you meet me somewhere? Somewhere we can talk privately? I, I guess so. When? Now? I know a coffee shop not far from the concert hall. It's called the Blue Note, do you know it? Marcus knew it. He had walked past it hundreds of times but never gone inside. It looked expensive, the kind of place for people with money to spare. Yes, I know it. Can you meet me there in an hour? Marcus agreed before he could talk himself out of it. He hung up and immediately wondered if he should have said no. What was he getting himself into? But he had already committed. He changed into his better clothes, just jeans and a clean button-up shirt, and took the bus back toward the concert hall. The Blue Note was warm and cozy inside, with soft lighting and jazz music playing quietly. Marcus spotted Elena immediately. She sat at a corner table, already with a coffee in front of her. She waved him over. Up close, Marcus could see the calluses on her fingers from years of violin strings. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She gestured for him to sit. Thank you for coming. Can I buy you a coffee? I'm fine, thank you. Marcus sat down stiffly, uncomfortable in this setting. What did you want to talk about? Elena studied him for a moment. I was there last night when you spoke to Maestro Castellano. I heard everything you said, and everything he said back. Marcus felt the shame wash over him again. Then you know I made a fool of myself. No, Elena said firmly. You made an offer to help. That's not foolish. What happened after that was Castellano's doing, not yours. He was right, though, Marcus said. I have no business thinking I could conduct at a professional level. Was he right? Elena leaned forward. Marcus, I've been with this orchestra for 15 years. I've worked with dozens of conductors. Some good, some bad, some exceptional. And I've learned to recognize when someone truly understands music. When you were talking to Castellano, you mentioned specific problems with the Rostov piece. You said you could see where we were struggling. Tell me, where are we struggling? Marcus hesitated. This felt like a test. But Elena was looking at him with genuine interest, not mockery. The transition into the second movement, he said slowly. The time signature changes from 7/8 to 5/4, and the cellos are supposed to carry the melody while the violins provide rhythmic support. But in rehearsal, the violins are too loud. They're drowning out the cellos. The balance is wrong. Elena's eyes widened slightly. Yes, exactly. What else? There's a section about 2/3 through where the brass comes in forte, but it should be piano. Rostov marked it clearly in the score. The brass is playing it like a triumph, but it's supposed to be haunting, almost ghost-like. The maestro hasn't corrected them because I think he's not familiar enough with Rostov's style to realize the error. You've read the score? Elena asked. How? Marcus felt his face heat. I found it on the podium one night when I was cleaning. I looked at it. I know I shouldn't have, and you understood it. You read it and understood what the composer wanted. Elena sat back in her chair, a small smile on her face. Marcus, I'm going to ask you something that might sound crazy, but I need you to hear me out, okay? Marcus nodded, uncertain where this was going. Some of us in the orchestra, we're not happy with how Castellano is handling the Rostov piece. The first secret rehearsal was scheduled for the next day at noon. Elena had arranged for them to use one of the small practice rooms on the 3rd floor, away from where Castellano typically worked. She told Marcus that 5 musicians would be there, just a small group to start. If it went well, more might join. Marcus barely slept that night. He kept waking up in a panic, convinced he had made a terrible mistake. What if he got there and his mind went blank? What if he couldn't remember how to conduct? What if the musicians realized immediately that he had no idea what he was doing? But mixed with the fear was something else. Excitement. A feeling he hadn't experienced in so long he almost didn't recognize it. The thought of working with music again, of actually participating instead of just listening from the shadows, made his heart race. He showed up to the concert hall at 11 a.m., hours before his shift started. He felt strange being there during the day. The building looked different in sunlight, more alive. People rushed around, preparing for rehearsals and performances. No one paid attention to Marcus as he made his way to the 3rd floor. The practice room was small, barely big enough for 6 people and their instruments. Elena was already there along with 4 others. She introduced them. James, the principal cellist, a man in his 50s with kind eyes. Yuki, a violinist in her late 20s with bright energy. David, a violist who looked nervous but curious. And Michael, a clarinetist who admitted right away that he was only there because Elena had convinced him to come. I'm skeptical, Michael said bluntly. No offense, but I don't know if a janitor can really help us with this piece. That's fair, Marcus said, his mouth dry. I'm skeptical too. Let's just see what happens. Elena had brought copies of the score. She handed them out along with pencils for making notes. We have 1 hour. Let's use it well. Marcus stood at the front of the small room, feeling ridiculous without a proper podium or baton. He had nothing but his hands and his voice. 5 professional musicians sat looking at him expectantly. He had never felt more exposed in his life. Okay, he said, his voice shaking slightly. Let's start with the opening. Elena, can you play the first violin part? Just the first 8 measures. Elena lifted her violin and began to play. Her technique was flawless, her tone beautiful. But Marcus heard immediately what was wrong. Stop, he said, holding up his hand. You're playing it too smoothly. Look at the notation. See those short marks above the notes? That's staccato, but not regular staccato. Rostov wants it sharp, almost aggressive. Like each note is a small shock. Try again, but make each note separate, harsh. Elena looked at the score again, then played. This time the melody had bite to it, an edge that changed the entire feeling. Like that? She asked. Exactly like that. Marcus felt a small spark of confidence. That's how the whole opening should feel. Not beautiful in the traditional sense, but unsettling. Rostov is trying to create tension from the very first note. That's why he chose 7/8 time. It keeps the listener off balance. But how do we keep together in 7/8? Yuki asked. In the full orchestra, we keep getting lost. Marcus thought for a moment. His hands began to move, showing the conducting pattern for 7/8. You have to feel it in groups, not as 7 equal beats, but as 3-2-2. 3, then 2, then 2, like this. He demonstrated, counting out loud. 1-2-3, 1-2-1-2. Feel the emphasis on those 3 beats and the others will fall into place. He had them try it together, just those first few measures. At first it was messy, but gradually the rhythm began to settle. They started to feel the pattern he described. When they played it together correctly, even in that small room with just a few instruments, Marcus could hear the power of what Rostov had written. This is good, James said, looking surprised. This is actually helping. They worked through the first movement section by section. Marcus found that once he started talking about the music, the fear faded away. This was familiar territory. This was what he had trained for all those years ago. The technical knowledge was still there, buried deep in his memory but intact. And more than that, he understood how to communicate with musicians, how to explain not just what to play but why. In measure 47, the cellos have that descending line, Marcus said to James. You're playing it like it's sad. But I think Rostov meant it to be angry, frustrated. Try giving it more attack, more intensity. James played it both ways, then nodded. You're right. It makes more sense with the rest of the section. How do you know all this? David asked. How do you understand what the composer wanted? Marcus paused. I read everything I could find about Rostov when I was in music school. He writes program notes about his pieces, explains his thinking, and once you understand how his mind works, you can read his intentions in the score. Every marking means something specific. The hour passed quickly. By the end, the small group had worked through the first movement. They sounded different than they had at the beginning. More cohesive, more intentional. Marcus could see it in their faces, too. They were starting to understand the piece instead of just playing notes. Same time tomorrow? Elena asked the group. Everyone agreed, including Michael, whose skepticism had softened. After they left, Elena stayed behind with Marcus. That was incredible, she said. You made more progress with us in 1 hour than we've made in weeks of rehearsal with Castellano. I got lucky, Marcus said, trying to downplay it. I happen to know about Rostov's work. It wasn't luck. It was skill. Elena looked at him seriously. Marcus, I think more people need to hear this. Can we bring in additional musicians tomorrow? Marcus felt panic rise in his chest. I don't know if I can handle a larger group. Today was just 5 people. If more come, you can do it, Elena said firmly. I saw you today. Once you started talking about music, you were confident, natural. You belong in that role, Marcus. He wanted to believe her. Part of him did believe her. But another part kept waiting for the moment when it would all fall apart. When everyone would realize he was a fraud. The next day, 10 musicians showed up. Then 15 the day after that. Word was spreading quietly through the orchestra. the janitor who understood Rostov. The musicians who came were careful, making sure Castellano didn't know about the meetings. They scheduled them during lunch breaks or early in the morning, before official rehearsals began. Marcus found himself at the concert hall for hours each day, working with different groups, explaining the same concepts over and over until everyone understood. At night, he still did his janitorial work, cleaning the same halls and stages. But now his days were full of music. His hands were learning to conduct again, his voice growing stronger as he gave instructions and corrections. The musicians started calling him Maestro Marcus as a joke at first, but gradually it stopped feeling like a joke. They treated him with respect, listened to his guidance, asked thoughtful questions. These were professional musicians who could have dismissed him, but instead they valued what he had to offer. One morning, Marcus was working with a group of brass players on a particularly tricky passage when Rosa appeared in the doorway. She stood there watching for a few minutes, tears in her eyes. After the session, she pulled him aside. "Look at you," she said, smiling. "This is who you're meant to be." "I'm just helping them understand one piece," Marcus protested, but even he could hear that his heart wasn't in the protest. "You're doing more than that. You're coming alive again. I can see it in your face, and she was right." Marcus felt different. He walked differently, stood straighter. When he looked in the mirror, he saw someone he hadn't seen in decades. Not the young student he had been, but someone new. Someone who had lived through hardship and disappointment and come out the other side with something valuable to offer. By 5 days before the gala, nearly 30 musicians had attended at least one of Marcus's sessions. Elena reported that the improvement was noticeable even in full rehearsals. Players who understood what Marcus had taught them were playing their parts with new confidence and precision. Castellano noticed the improvement too, though he seemed confused about where it was coming from. "The orchestra is finally starting to get it," Marcus heard the maestro say during a break. "I knew my methods would eventually work." Marcus and Elena exchanged a glance but said nothing. Let Castellano think what he wanted. They were focused on the music. But not everyone was supportive. Michael, the clarinetist who had been skeptical from the beginning, seemed to grow more uncomfortable as the secret rehearsals expanded. On the 4th day, he pulled Elena aside after a session. Marcus overheard part of their conversation from where he was packing up. "This feels wrong," Michael said. "We're going behind Castellano's back. If he finds out, there could be serious consequences." "He won't find out if we're careful," Elena replied. "But what's the point? Marcus can't conduct at the actual gala. He's not certified, not official. We're putting all this work into learning his interpretation, but we'll still have to perform with whoever Castellano finds, or with no one at all if he cancels the Rostov piece." Elena didn't have a good answer to that, because Michael was right. No matter how much progress they made in these secret sessions, Marcus couldn't be the one on the podium during the actual performance. The board would never allow it. 3 days before the gala, everything changed. Marcus was in the middle of a morning session with a group of string players when they heard shouting from downstairs. Elena immediately stood up, her face concerned. "That sounds like it's coming from the main rehearsal hall." They all rushed down to find a crowd gathered outside the hall doors. Castellano had collapsed during rehearsal. Paramedics were already there, loading him onto a stretcher. The maestro was conscious but pale, arguing weakly with the medical team. "I'm fine," Castellano was saying, his voice strained. "Just tired. I can continue the rehearsal." "Sir, your blood pressure is dangerously high," one of the paramedics said firmly. "You need to go to the hospital now." Marcus stood at the back of the crowd watching. He felt a strange mix of emotions. Concern for Castellano's health, certainly, but also a creeping awareness that this changed everything. If Castellano couldn't conduct, the orchestra's executive director, Margaret Chen, pushed through the crowd. She was a small woman in her 60s, always impeccably dressed, always in control. But now her face showed panic. "Victor, what happened?" "Just stress," Castellano said as the paramedics lifted the stretcher. "Too much work, not enough sleep. I'll be back tomorrow." "Sir, you won't be back tomorrow," the other paramedic said. "The doctor is going to order complete rest. At least 2 weeks, maybe more." The color drained from Margaret's face. 2 weeks? But the gala is in 3 days. "I'm sorry, ma'am. But his health has to come first." They wheeled Castellano away. He was still protesting, but his voice was getting weaker. Margaret stood frozen for a moment, then seemed to pull herself together. "Everyone back to your stations. We'll figure this out. Nobody panicked, but everyone was panicking. Marcus could see it in their faces. The gala was the most important event of the year. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations depended on it. The program had been advertised for months. Tickets were sold out. Critics and journalists would be there, and now 3 days before they had no conductor. Marcus slipped away from the crowd and went back to the practice room where he had been working with the musicians. They followed him, their instruments forgotten, everyone talking at once. What are we going to do? Can they find another conductor in 3 days? Maybe they'll cancel the whole thing. They can't cancel. The financial loss would be enormous. Elena held up her hands for quiet. Let's not panic. Margaret is good at solving problems. She'll find someone. But Marcus could see the doubt in her eyes. Finding a qualified conductor on 3 days' notice was nearly impossible. Anyone good enough would already be booked. Anyone available on such short notice probably wasn't good enough for a gala performance. The morning session ended early. Everyone was too distracted to focus. Marcus went home, but he couldn't rest. He paced his small apartment, his mind racing. He turned on the news, but he couldn't focus on it. He tried to read, but the words blurred on the page. Around 3 p.m., his phone rang. It was Elena. Can you come to the concert hall? Now? What's happening? Just come, please. Marcus took the bus back, arriving at the concert hall 45 minutes later. Elena was waiting for him in the lobby along with about 20 other musicians. They all looked serious. Follow us, Elena said. They led him to a conference room on the second floor. Inside, Margaret Chen sat at a large table covered with papers and her laptop. She looked up when they entered, her eyes red from stress or crying or both. Elena, what is this? I don't have time for— Margaret, you need to listen to us, Elena said firmly. We have a solution to your conductor problem. Margaret looked at the group of musicians, then at Marcus standing awkwardly at the back. I'm listening. Elena took a deep breath. For the past week, many of us have been working with Marcus Thompson on the Rostov piece. He's helped us understand it in ways we never did before. He knows the music. He knows conducting. We believe he can conduct the Rostov piece at the gala. Margaret's eyes went to Marcus. She looked confused. Isn't he the janitor? He's a musician who works as a janitor, Elena corrected. He studied conducting at Brookfield Conservatory. He's been teaching us during his lunch breaks. The improvement in our performance is because of him. I don't understand, Margaret said slowly. Why would a trained conductor be working as a janitor? Marcus felt all eyes turned to him. His throat was tight, but he forced himself to speak. I had to drop out before graduating. Family emergency. I've been working regular jobs ever since. But I never forgot music. Elena is right. I've been helping them with the Rostov piece. Margaret studied him for a long moment. Elena, can I speak to you privately? The other musicians filed out, leaving Elena and Margaret alone with Marcus. Margaret gestured for them to sit. Tell me everything. From the beginning. Elena explained the whole story. The secret rehearsals, the progress they had made, Marcus's knowledge of Rostov's work. Margaret listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. When Elena finished, Margaret turned to Marcus. Can you really conduct this piece? Marcus wanted to say yes confidently, but honesty won out. I believe I can. I understand the music. I've been working with the musicians on the difficult sections, but I haven't conducted a full orchestra in 25 years. And I've never conducted a piece this challenging in front of an audience. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement, Margaret said dryly. I know, but I also know that you're running out of options. If you can find someone better in the next 3 days, you should absolutely hire them instead of me. But if you can't— Marcus let the sentence hang in the air. Margaret rubbed her temples. I've called 12 conductors today. 12. Every single one is either booked or wants more money than we can possibly pay on short notice. The few who are available aren't qualified for a contemporary piece like the Rostov. One of them admitted he'd never even heard of Dmitri Rostov. She looked at Marcus with tired eyes. I'm desperate. That's the truth. I'm willing to consider anything at this point. There's something else you should know, Elena said. Nearly half the orchestra has worked with Marcus now. They trust him. They respond to him. That relationship, that trust, it's important. You can't just bring in a stranger and expect the same results, even if they're technically qualified. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she opened her laptop and started typing. What year did you study at Brookfield? Marcus told her. She made phone calls, sent emails, pulled up records. For 2 hours, she verified Marcus's story. She called the Brookfield Conservatory and spoke to the registrar. She found records of his enrollment, his classes, his performance of the Brahms Symphony. She even tracked down one of his old professors, Professor Raymond Hartwell, who was now retired but remembered Marcus clearly. He was exceptionally talented, Professor Hartwell said over speakerphone. Margaret had put it on speaker so Marcus could hear. One of the best conducting students I taught in 40 years. I was devastated when he had to leave. I always wondered what became of him. He's been working as a janitor, Margaret said bluntly. There was a pause. That's a tragedy. That young man could have been conducting major orchestras by now if circumstances had been different. After the call ended, Margaret looked at Marcus differently, not with pity exactly, but with a kind of understanding. Life doesn't always work out the way we plan, does it? No, ma'am, it doesn't. Margaret closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. Here's my problem. Even if you're qualified, even if the musicians trust you, the board will never agree to this. A janitor conducting at our biggest fundraiser? They'll think I've lost my mind. The donors will think it's a joke. The critics will tear us apart. Then don't tell them, Elena said suddenly. Not until after. What? Put Marcus's real name in the program. Marcus Thompson, guest conductor. List his connection to Brookfield Conservatory. Make it sound professional and official. No one needs to know he's been working here as a janitor. And by the time anyone finds out after the performance, it won't matter if the performance was good. Margaret considered this. That's risky. If it comes out before the gala, the fallout could be enormous. And if you cancel the Rostov piece, or if you put someone unqualified on that podium, the performance will be a disaster, Elena countered. That's also risky. You have to choose which risk you're willing to take. Marcus watched this conversation happening around him, feeling like he was in a dream. Were they seriously considering this? Were they really talking about putting him on stage in front of hundreds of people? The idea was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Margaret looked at Marcus. I need to be honest with you. If you do this and it goes badly, you'll be blamed. People will say I was irresponsible for hiring you. They'll say you were unqualified. Your name will be in programs and reviews forever, associated with a failed performance. That's a risk you need to understand. I understand, Marcus said quietly. But he was thinking about something Rosa had said. About trying and failing being better than never trying at all. About not letting fear stop you from becoming who you were meant to be. I need to talk to the board, Margaret said, standing up. Wait here. She left the room. Elena reached over and squeezed Marcus's hand. You can do this, can I? Marcus asked. Elena, what if I get up there and freeze? What if I make mistakes? What if I let everyone down? Then you'll be human, Elena said simply. Marcus, perfection isn't possible. But giving your best is. That's all anyone can ask. An hour later, Margaret returned. She looked exhausted but determined. I spoke to 5 board members. 3 said absolutely not. 2 said maybe. The chair of the board said he'll trust my judgment, but if this goes wrong, I'm fired. She looked directly at Marcus. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to have 1 full rehearsal tomorrow with you conducting the Rostov piece. Just that piece, not the whole program. If the orchestra responds well, if you show me that you can actually do this, then you're hired. Guest conductor for 1 piece, 1 night. $5,000, which is less than we'd normally pay, but more than I should be offering given the circumstances. $5,000. Marcus's mind reeled. That was more than he made in 2 months of janitorial work. But if that rehearsal doesn't go well, Margaret continued, we cancel the Rostov piece and extend the classical program. No second chances, this is it. Are you willing to take that risk? Marcus thought about his apartment, his small, quiet life, the box he had thrown away in the dumpster. He thought about 25 years of pushing mops and emptying trash cans, of being invisible, of watching from the shadows while others lived their dreams. He thought about his daughter Jennifer, who didn't even know her father had once been a musician, and he thought about the music, about the beauty of the Rostov piece, about the joy he'd felt these past few days working with the orchestra, about the feeling of conducting, of shaping sound into emotion. Yes, he said. I'll do it. Margaret nodded. Rehearsal is tomorrow at 10 a.m. Don't be late. And Marcus? You'll need something better to wear than a janitor's uniform. Borrow a suit if you have to. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep at all. He lay in bed, his mind going over every measure of the Rostov piece, every conducting pattern, every cue and tempo change. Fear kept trying to paralyze him, but he pushed it away. He had one chance. One rehearsal to prove he could do this. He couldn't afford to waste energy on fear. At 5 a.m., he gave up trying to sleep. He got up and practiced conducting in his living room using a pencil as a baton, counting out loud. His arms remembered the patterns. His body remembered the feeling. It was all still there, buried under years of disuse but not forgotten. Rosa called him at 7 a.m. Elena told me what happened. I'm so proud of you. I haven't done it yet, Marcus said. I might fail tomorrow. You might, Rosa agreed. But at least you're trying. That's what matters. At 9:30 a.m., Marcus walked into the concert hall wearing a borrowed suit from one of the musicians. It was slightly too big, but it would do. His hands were shaking. His mouth was dry. But he was there. The orchestra was assembled on stage. All of them. Every single member. Word had spread. They all wanted to see if the janitor could really conduct. Some looked supportive. Others looked skeptical or amused. Marcus saw Castellano's assistant conductor, Thomas, sitting in the audience section. He looked curious but not hostile. Margaret stood at the side of the stage. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Thompson. Marcus walked to the podium. He picked up the baton that had been left there for him. It felt light and perfect in his hand, just like his old one had felt. He looked out at the orchestra. 70 musicians looking back at him, waiting, judging. This was it. This was his chance. The only chance he would ever have. Marcus raised his baton. He took a deep breath. And he began to conduct. The night of the gala arrived with terrifying speed. Marcus had barely slept for 2 days. The rehearsal had gone well. Better than well, actually. The orchestra had responded to him with energy and precision. Margaret had watched from the audience, and when they finished, she had simply nodded and said, "You're hired." But a successful rehearsal in an empty hall was one thing. Performing in front of hundreds of wealthy donors, critics, and journalists was something entirely different. The pressure felt like a weight on Marcus's chest, making it hard to breathe. He arrived at the concert hall at 5 p.m., 3 hours before the performance. The building was transformed. Red carpets lined the walkways. Flowers decorated every corner. Staff in formal uniforms rushed around making final preparations. Crystal chandeliers sparkled. Everything had to be perfect. Marcus went to the small dressing room that had been assigned to him. It was the same room where he had overheard Castellano's conversation weeks ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. He hung up the tuxedo that Elena had helped him rent. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. When was the last time he had worn formal clothes? His wedding, maybe. That was more than 15 years ago. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," Marcus called. Elena entered, already dressed in her concert blacks. She smiled at him. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "Like I might throw up." "That's normal. I still get nervous before big performances, and I've been doing this for 20 years. She sat down in the chair next to him. "I wanted to tell you something before tonight. No matter what happens out there, you've already accomplished something amazing. You helped us understand that piece. You made us better musicians. That matters regardless of what happens on stage." "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, "for believing in me, for giving me this chance." "You gave yourself this chance," Elena corrected. "When you spoke to Castellano that night, when you refused to stay invisible, that's when this all started. You did that, Marcus, no one else." After Elena left, Marcus sat alone with his thoughts. He thought about his father, who had died never knowing that his son would one day conduct again. He thought about his mother, living in a retirement home now, who he called every week but never told about his music. He thought about all the years in between, all the dreams he had buried, all the parts of himself he had hidden away. And he thought about his daughter, Jennifer. She was at college 5 hours away, busy with her own life. She had no idea what was happening tonight. Part of him wished she could be here, but another part was relieved. If he failed, at least she wouldn't witness it. At 6 p.m., the doors opened for the gala guests. Marcus could hear the sound of voices, laughter, expensive shoes on marble floors. He peeked out from backstage and saw the audience beginning to fill the seats. Women in elegant gowns, men in tuxedos, jewelry glittering under the lights. These were the donors who kept the orchestra alive. The people who could write checks for tens of thousands of dollars without blinking. and they had paid to see a polished professional performance, not a janitor pretending to be a conductor. The first half of the program began at 7:30 p.m. A guest conductor from Chicago led the orchestra through the classical pieces. Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms. Marcus watched from the wings, studying how the conductor moved, how he communicated with the orchestra. The man was technically skilled but somewhat cold, Marcus thought. Correct, but not passionate. The first half ended to enthusiastic applause. There was a 20-minute intermission. Marcus's heart was pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. The Rostov piece was immediately after intermission. He had maybe 15 minutes before he had to walk onto that stage. Margaret found him backstage. The audience is good tonight, engaged, generous. This is exactly what we need. She looked at Marcus carefully. Are you ready? Marcus wanted to say no. He wanted to run out the back door and keep running until he was far away from this place, but instead he nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. The orchestra believes in you. I believe in you. Now you need to believe in yourself. Margaret squeezed his shoulder and walked away. Rosa appeared next wearing her work uniform. She had asked for permission to watch from the back of the hall during her break. I cleaned your dressing room 3 years, she said, her eyes wet. And now you're using it as a conductor. Life is strange and beautiful, yes? Yes, Marcus agreed, managing a smile. The house lights blinked, signaling the end of intermission. The audience returned to their seats. Marcus could hear them settling in, programs rustling, voices quieting. The orchestra was already on stage, tuning their instruments, waiting for him. This was it, the moment that would either validate everything he had hoped for or confirm his worst fears. There was no middle ground. Either he could still conduct or he couldn't. Either he belonged on that stage or he didn't. Marcus straightened his tuxedo. He picked up his baton. He took one final deep breath. Then he walked toward the stage. The walk from the wings to the podium was the longest walk of Marcus's life. Every step felt heavy. The stage lights were bright, making him squint. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him. He heard whispers from the audience. Who is that? I've never heard of Marcus Thompson. Is he local? He reached the podium and turned to face the orchestra. 70 faces looking back at him. Some familiar from his teaching sessions, others he had never worked with directly. But in Elena's eyes, in James's nod, in the smiles from Yuki and David, he saw support. They believed in him. Now he had to believe in himself. Marcus raised his baton. The hall went silent. This was the moment. Everything he had worked for, everything he had hoped for, came down to the next 20 minutes. The Rostov piece, Fractured Light, would either soar or crash, and he would be the one to determine which. He gave the upbeat. The orchestra responded instantly. The violins came in with that opening phrase, sharp and staccato, just as he had taught them. The unusual 7/8 rhythm locked in immediately, everyone feeling those grouped beats the way he had shown them. 3-2-2, 3-2-2. And Marcus forgot to be afraid. Once the music started, there was no room for fear. There was only the music, only the orchestra, only the moment. His arms moved through familiar patterns. His body swayed with the rhythm. His face showed every emotion the piece required. When the music was tense, he was tense. When it softened, he softened. He wasn't just conducting the notes. He was conducting the feeling, the meaning, the soul of the piece. The orchestra responded to every gesture, every cue. In measure 47, James played that descending cello line with exactly the anger and frustration Marcus had suggested. The transition into the second movement was seamless, the 5/4 time signature causing no confusion because they had practiced it so many times. The cellos carried the melody while the violins provided support, the balance perfect. When the brass entered in that section 2/3 through, they played it piano, ghost-like and haunting, just as Rostov had intended. Marcus saw the surprise on some faces in the audience. This wasn't what they expected from a contemporary piece. This wasn't harsh or inaccessible. This was beautiful and emotional and deeply human. The piece built toward its climax in the middle section. The volume grew, the intensity increased. Marcus's arms were fully extended, demanding everything the orchestra could give. They gave it. The sound filled the concert hall, powerful and overwhelming. Some audience members actually gasped. This was what contemporary classical music could be when performed with understanding and passion. Then came the breakdown, the quiet introspective section. Marcus brought the volume down to almost nothing. The strings played so softly they were barely audible. The audience leaned forward in their seats, straining to hear. And in that near silence, the beauty of Rostov's composition became clear. The fractured light of the title, breaking apart and reforming, finding peace after chaos. The final section approached. This was where many contemporary pieces failed, unable to find a satisfying conclusion. But Rostov had written something special, a resolution that wasn't triumphant but felt earned, like accepting life as it is rather than as you wished it would be. Marcus conducted these final measures with tears in his eyes. This music was his story. Fractured light, broken dreams, and finally acceptance. The last note hung in the air. Marcus held the orchestra in that suspended moment, letting the sound fade naturally into silence. His arms lowered slowly. The piece was over. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, the hall was completely silent. Marcus's heart sank. Had they hated it? Had he failed after all? Then someone in the audience stood up. Then another. Then another. Suddenly, the entire hall was on its feet, applauding. It wasn't polite applause. It was thunderous, overwhelming. People were shouting, "Bravo!" Some were wiping tears from their eyes. The critics in the front row were clapping enthusiastically. The board members looked stunned but pleased. Marcus turned to the orchestra. They were standing too, applauding him. Elena was crying openly. James nodded at him with respect. Even the musicians who had been skeptical were smiling. They had done it. Together, they had brought this challenging piece to life. Marcus bowed to the audience, then turned and bowed to the orchestra. The applause continued for what felt like forever. People didn't want to stop clapping. They wanted to show that they had witnessed something special. Finally, the applause began to fade. Marcus left the stage on shaking legs. The moment he was in the wings, out of sight of the audience, his knees nearly gave out. Elena caught him, laughing and crying at the same time. "You did it. Marcus, you did it." Other musicians crowded around, congratulating him, hugging him. Margaret appeared, looking relieved and triumphant. "The board members are asking who you are, where you came from. They're talking about bringing you back for next season." Marcus could barely process the words. It felt like a dream. After 25 years of being invisible, suddenly people wanted to know his name, wanted to hire him, valued what he could do. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. There was a reception after the concert where donors mingled with musicians. Marcus had to shake hands with dozens of wealthy strangers who told him how moved they were by the performance. A music critic from the city's major newspaper asked for an interview. The chair of the board mentioned something about a formal conducting position. But the moment that mattered most came near the end of the night. Marcus was standing alone for a moment, trying to catch his breath, when he saw a figure approaching from across the room, a young woman in a simple dress, looking completely out of place among all the formal gowns and tuxedos. It was Jennifer, his daughter. She walked up to him with tears streaming down her face. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me?" Marcus stared at her, confused. "Tell you what? How did you even know I was here? You're supposed to be at school." "Rosa called me 3 days ago. She told me everything. About your past. About the music school, about what you were doing here. She said you were conducting tonight and that I needed to be here." Jennifer wiped her eyes. "Dad, I drove 5 hours to see this. I've been sitting in the back of the hall watching you. And I had no idea. All these years you never said anything. You never told me you were a musician." "I wasn't a musician," Marcus said quietly. "I was a janitor who used to study music a long time ago." "No," Jennifer said firmly. "You were a musician who worked as a janitor to take care of me. Rosa told me about Grandpa getting sick, about you dropping out of school to help the family, about how you gave up your dreams so we could survive." She grabbed his hands. "You sacrificed everything for us. And I never knew. I thought you were just a janitor. I'm so sorry, Dad." "You have nothing to be sorry for," Marcus said, his own eyes filling with tears now. "I wanted you to have a better life. I wanted you to have opportunities I didn't have. That's what parents do. But you could have been conducting orchestras all these years. You could have been famous, successful. And instead you were cleaning floors so I could go to college." Jennifer was crying harder now. "When I watched you up there tonight leading all those people making that beautiful music, I was so proud. And so sad, because you should have been doing this all along." Marcus pulled his daughter into a hug. They stood there together, both crying, while the reception continued around them. All the wealthy donors, all the board members, All the success of the evening, none of it mattered as much as this moment with his daughter. Finally, she understood. Finally, she knew who he really was. "I'm not sad," Marcus whispered into her hair. "Not anymore. Maybe I lost 25 years, but I got tonight. I got this one perfect night. And I have you. That's enough." They stood there together until Rosa appeared, smiling through her own tears. "I hope you don't mind that I called her." "Thank you," Marcus said to Rosa, "for everything. For believing in me. For pushing me. For not letting me give up." "That's what friends do," Rosa said simply. The gala finally ended around 1 a.m. Marcus changed back into his regular clothes in the dressing room. As he was leaving, he ran into Thomas, Castellano's assistant conductor. Thomas extended his hand. "That was exceptional," Thomas said. "I've conducted that piece before, and I've heard it performed a dozen times, but I've never heard it done better than you did it tonight." "Thank you," Marcus said, shaking his hand. "That means a lot coming from you. I'm sorry about what happened with Maestro Castellano. How he treated you when you first approached him. He was wrong. We were all wrong to dismiss you." Marcus nodded. He wasn't entirely wrong. I was just a janitor. I hadn't conducted in 25 years. There was no reason to believe in me. Except there was.